Hey friends, welcome back to Becoming Unbound, where we explore the journeys, challenges, and the triumphs of breaking free and building the life of your dreams. I'm your host, Carly Butler, and I'm here to inspire and empower you to embrace the unbound life, where possibilities are endless and freedom is yours to claim. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by someone who embodies creativity, passion, and authenticity, Megan Telpner. Megan is a multi-passionate entrepreneur, best-selling author, a super connector, and a true heart-led visionary. Her work has inspired countless people to embrace healthier, more fulfilling lives, and she does it all with a touch of vintage charm. I had the privilege of knowing Megan in a very special way as her child's teacher and camp counselor, and getting to know her has been an absolute gift. And I can't wait for you to hear her incredible insights, wisdom. So let's dive into this meaningful conversation with Megan Telpner. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you for having me, Carly. Super jazzed to be here chatting with you, especially on this topic.
Yes, you are one of the people that I sort of looked to understanding what this becoming unbound, living a life that really had a lot of, meaning and fulfillment, and like understanding that there were different paths to take. So it's super, super amazing that you're here now. We are officially in 2025. I feel like we're ready to go. I'm certainly feeling that way for sure. So welcome to the podcast. I'd love to start off with just let's hear a little bit about how we sort of got to know each other. Maybe you can tell a bit of that story. It's quite a sweet story. So do you want to start? How did we meet? What have you been up to? How did our worlds collide?
So when my son was, I guess, 5, he just turned 5, we were looking for some summer camp options for him. And gosh, no, maybe he was 4. He could have been 4. I don't remember. Anyway, we're looking for some summer camp options, and you were running a camp through sort of a smaller organization that we knew was letting children run free, letting them breathe air without a cotton filter over their face and those sorts of things. And and it was a big deal for us because he'd been in a pretty sheltered little bubble because of what was going on in the world at that time. And we were just like, I felt like my job during that period was to be the bridge between everyone else's fear and my child. And it was like a no-go zone. So that was my priority, was for him to never know that there was anything unusual going on, and to give him the most normal childhood during that key period from when he was 3 years old till 6 years old, basically. That's when they're like the most, they're absorbing and understanding the world around them. And so when I saw this camp, it sounded great. And I remember dropping him off. I remember we were like at the Grenadier Cafe in High Park. And it was the first time we'd left him sort of with, quote unquote, a stranger. I felt really good about you when I first met you. You had a great energy. The other children seemed lovely. And there was no tears that day. There was tears later on because he'd gone through like a more negative camp experience, but then we returned to yours. But I just remember him waving and me crying as I walked away. And my husband Josh was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I'm not okay." Like, I wanted to like hide in the bushes and just like watch him to make sure that he kind of found his way. But it was great. And you and I hit it off since then. And you ultimately ended up, through a few staffing changes, ended up being his teacher for a portion of time. And now I'm lucky enough to have lured you into the occasional childcare, lured you in with offers of spa, offers of saunas and red light and biomat and a little fun with the little boy. And so it's great. And then, we stay connected through our multiple voice notes.
Yes, voice notes are it. I'm so sold on them.
I know, they're like little mini podcasts. So I like have to set myself up with like a little crochet to listen to your 5-minute voice note. I love it.
It's great. It's like this inner monologue, and sometimes I've sent voice notes before, and some people are like, no, thank you. I don't want a voice note. Like, I don't get to respond, and it's not fair to me in the moment. Like, if you're expressing something, but if it can be light and fun and like I love it. And then I'm sometimes go on rambles and stuff. But yeah, it's great. I love that story of like us coming together. And I feel like we just got it. And I feel like in that time, in the past 5 years, I guess, like when you figured out people who just got it just made sense. Like we just sort of hit it off that way. And that was kind of my first introduction to what it was to give children freedom and to allow them just to like live without fear and to, I mean, we were all very like contained and wonderful and supervised, but we were just running around the forest, having fun, breathing fresh air. Like it was such a beautiful community that was built so organically.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was amazing. And that was in my previous career. I feel like I've now kind of retired from that teaching, camp counselor, childcare portion of my life, and I feel very connected to you because you've also done this early retirement. I feel like everyone told me, they're like, wait till you retire as a teacher. It's going to be amazing. Like, think about the pension and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, you're right. I should retire now.
Yeah. And I had that, it's funny because I had that feeling, but I had it after my first day of work when I was 24 years old. It's like, I got to
Yeah.
retire. Like, this is all about retirement because this, what's happening here is not going to work for me.
Yeah. So what was that moment that you were like, oh heck no, this whole thing is this 9 to 5, this clocking in and out. What was like the thing where you were like, nah, this
It
can't
was
be it.
it was probably my first day at a real job. So like a job that like wasn't, I was a summer camp counselor. So like a job that didn't have an end in sight. Like I'd taken a year off after high school to work for a year before I went traveling, and I took a year off. So like there was those kinds of jobs, but this was like post university. I'd done my final big trip and then got a job, and it was with SunQuest Vacations, writing the descriptions for the travel catalogs. And I got into the office. I was shown my cubicle. There was like light rock radio playing. It was someone's birthday, so there was like the box of Tim Hortons with the balloons. And I was like, "Oh goodness. So this is it. Like this is it." And I was there 3 months, but after about a week I was like, "Okay, I think I'll make it to lunch today. Like I can get to lunch." And then I was like, "Okay, I can get to the." And it was brutal. And lifeless would be the word. And I was like, this can't be it. And like, this is killing my day. Like, I have no time to do, like, the entitled 24-year-old. I have no time to myself. Still living in my parents' house. And I ended up getting my next job was in advertising, and my commitment was to do it a year. I gave 7 weeks notice to the day when my year was up. And all that time I was like, I don't want to do this. Like this, I'm solving other people's problems. I'm solving problems for businesses that is not relevant to me. It just had no meaning, which again, like I was in my quarter life crisis. Like, what do I want to be? But I also knew I knew in my heart there was more, and there was more potential, and I suffered through it. And ultimately, I mean, before I started my first job, I'd gone traveling in Africa, as I mentioned, and was vaccine injured, which is how I ended up on this path. So I was getting progressively sicker and sicker. And my outward world, what I was doing on the outside, was brutal. Like it was, I went from job to job. It was 9 jobs in 3 years in this phase when I was working in advertising. I loved job interviews, loved first dates, wasn't interested in putting in the work for the long term of any of it. Through that process, I was getting sicker and sicker. And so ultimately it was like this grand implosion in my insides, but also at my life being like, I've now at this point, I was 26, I'd followed everything I was, in quotes, supposed to do to be successful. I'd gone to university and I got all the scholarships and I got the university gold medal and I got all those things and I got the corporate job and I was getting raises and promotions and better jobs and I was looking for a condo and I had a cute boyfriend who had a British accent and all of it was horrible. Like none of it was what I truly wanted in my heart. It wasn't aligned. The challenge was that I didn't know what the answer to that problem was. I didn't know how to solve it. But ultimately what solved it was getting healthy and resolving this health issue I had, this autoimmune disease that I developed. And then I started my business, which at the time when I was starting, I went back to school to study nutrition. And then my business was teaching in-person cooking classes and doing, I wrote a blog that very quickly became syndicated with the National Post. I was shameless in what I would ask, the opportunities I would ask for. And I was surprised by how many yeses I got, which to me were just little winks that I was on the right track. But I also knew that I did not want to work. And it was really funny because my first year running my own business, I grossed $8,000. And my second year, I grossed $30,000. This was 2008, 2009. And one of my best girlfriends from kindergarten still is. She's an investment advisor with one of the big banks. And I said, listen, I want to retire at 30 was my original goal. No, maybe it was 35. And so she did a projection of what retirement would look like if I continued earning $30,000. And then no, I'm going to double it next year. And then I'm going to double it. And I'm going to keep doing that. I had no idea how I was going to do this. But the goal from very early on was to retire at 35. I didn't, because when I got to 35, I was like in it. Like I had my second book come out. I was in the process. I had just taken everything online, launching the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. So I had grown it. But yeah, it ultimately achieving that financial freedom in a way that was joyful has been a goal for a long time. It was that I had no idea how I was going to do it. And that was actually a big part of the learning process. Like as much as it was building my business, it was understanding the world and money in a way that was not status quo. Because everyone was telling me it was impossible. That's not realistic was probably what I was told most often in the first 5 years of running my business.
Wow. I love that you said, like, it seemed like you checked all the boxes for quote unquote success that we're taught in this system of like, well, you go to university, you get a job, you go there, you clock in and out, and as I'm doing my robot arms, like, and you punch the card, and then you have your Timbits in the break room for 15 minutes, and then you get back to work, and then you somehow like have a life that includes like making some food maybe, and gosh, if it could be healthy food, that's like a whole other thing. And so you did it, you checked all the boxes, you did it, and then you were still like, no, no, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting that this version of success that we're taught in school and as in society in general, even outside of school, it's like it's a real head scratcher, to be honest.
And one of the things that was really challenging is that like I have a close relationship with my parents. I still do. So they're like my advisors and also my best cheerleaders. And they would, I'd be like, oh, I don't love advertising. Like, and my dad had an ad agency. They wouldn't hire me there, which was fine. But they would be like, you're so good at it. Like, you're so good at it. Why would you do something else? And I think for a lot of people, that's what stops them. They're on paper succeeding and thriving and growing and developing this career in this industry that they're so good at. And I was like, well, I think I could be good at a lot of stuff. Like if I can figure out this world, I can apply it to anything I ever want to do. But I think that's what stops people. A lot of it is that they're successful at something. So why would they risk it all to try something they might actually be horrible at or fail at just because it's what they want to do? Which is kind of what you did.
I, as you were saying, oh, but you're so good at it. I feel it's funny that you would say this, but I feel like you even were one of the people who could attest to the fact that I was good at what I was doing. Teaching comes very naturally. I have a great connection with children. Like it feels like there were moments where I was just like, oh, this is so fun. And yet here I am still doing the clocking in and out. There's Timbits in the break room. You just do this and this and this. And like, and I guess then you go home at the end of the day. Now my schedule, I think people think that teaching, you get summers off and you get to leave work at 3:30, and that's not true at all. But it totally is something where like, oh, well, you're good at it. Just keep going. Like, just don't think too hard about it.
Yeah.
And you have the success. So just keep going. That's the
Yeah.
story that we're told.
Yes.
I'm really curious about that financial freedom piece because
Yeah.
it can be accomplished in a lot of different ways. Let's say, you climb the corporate ladder, you get the raise, you get the next better job or the next better role, or you take on more responsibility, or maybe you even do shift careers, but you're still climbing that ladder. So in that idea of financial freedom, what does that what does it mean for you? Like, how does that look in your day-to-day life, if you're planning out a year or the next 5 years? Like, what does that financial freedom look like? And how could we sort of frame it for
Right.
our listeners here?
So the most basic understanding of financial freedom is that your money is invested in such a way that it is delivering returns that cover your cost of living. So you're no longer working for money. Your money is working in a way that covers what you need to live on and optimally live on happily, like to your optimal standard of living and quality of life. So that's like the most basic definition. And, people throw around financial freedom all the time, and I don't think actually understand what that means.
Mhm.
So I started with, in my own life, well, I started, we were talking before we started recording that she's like, you said I have such nice light. I was like, yes. And I also lived in this 60 square feet of this corner while my entire business was operating on the other side of the room. And so I learned to live a very lean life where, that first year when I was making 8,000 a year, I was bringing food home from my parents' fridge. Like I literally remember having a tote bag and grabbing some apples from their fridge drawer. And then I would live off the leftovers from my cooking classes was basically what I was doing. Um, I've always been kind of crafty with fashion. So I've never spent a lot on clothes. I love clothes and I love having really cool and interesting things that are unique, but I don't spend a lot on that. So I was very clear on the quality of life metrics that mattered to me. So it's gotten a little more luxurious of late, but I don't need a lot of money to be happy day to day. And so knowing that, I was always really mindful about spending, both spending in my company and also personally. And I knew what the number was that I needed to hit. So if we want to get strategic for a moment, I had an incorporated business. And I would, as my business grew, instead of reinvesting all of the retained earnings, like the money left over at the end of the year after everyone had been paid and taxes had been paid and, expenses had been paid, instead of reinvesting that all back into my business, I started investing it to be able to live off in my retirement. And so I knew that once those retained earnings that were invested in earning returns reached a certain number, my magic number, I knew I could turn off the faucet of ongoing income generating. And so I did manage to achieve it when I turned 40. We paid off the mortgage on our first house and we were going to be we were earning enough interest if we were to withdraw those funds to cover our cost of living. I didn't turn off the faucet because I was still having fun. I was like, okay, it took a lot of the pressure off, but I was never making decisions about my business for large windfalls. I was never looking for investors or acquisition. I was never looking to scale it to something massive, which I could have. I very well could have just kept reinvesting and building out this massive company, which was never anything I wanted to run. So it was having those really clear, which is counter to everything in entrepreneurship right now. When we look at, like the Shark Tanks or Dragon Dens of the world and all the angel investors and the private equity and all of these things that people are dumping money into or acquisitions to buy a company to grow your business. So all these companies are getting investors, dumping money and growing so that optimally they can sell it for a high number. My goal was to keep it small and joyful and ridiculously profitable while treating my staff exceptionally well. I paid everyone exactly what they asked for. was able to give bonuses. We did like crafternoons. We had elixir chats. Like we did really fun things in the company. I wasn't like skimping in that way. I always delivered value for the people who joined, which is why they're still so supportive. But I was keeping it profitable. I didn't have like tons of subscription services and all these things that businesses do. I was really focused on what was earning money within the company and pouring energy into those aspects. And that was how I did it. And like it was working intelligently, and there were big risks, but not risks that would demolish the entire company if it didn't work out. Things worked, some things didn't work. And where things were working, I would focus on that. And it wasn't for the vanity metrics. It wasn't for social media following. It wasn't for any of that. It was for the life I wanted to be living in the moment of running the business, and ultimately to be able to, you know, quote unquote, retire early, to not have to work for money anymore, to work because it was truly, truly simply what was in my heart.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it also sounds like, as with that, while growing your business and keeping it profitable and making sure that all of the, like, there was it sounds like you went above and beyond for your staff and for the actual culture of it. It sounds like in your own life, you valued joy and time with family or friends, and like being able to go home and, cook your own meals and take time with that, and having like the luxury of time. And for me, and I've talked to a couple of people now on the podcast, that it sounds like also everyone's definition of freedom is different. So whether it's living a luxurious life where you have lots of time, or living in a financially free place where you have the luxury of abundance or wealth, or maybe like even for myself, one of my markers of freedom was having freedom over my own time and autonomy over my schedule. So these different definitions of freedom, I feel, are so beautifully encompassed in whether it's becoming unbound or living this life that includes that aspect of freedom and joy.
Yeah.
And it sounds like in your life, that was a value for you. And I think your value systems and how you figured that out, that's also a really, really key piece of that, of you figured out early what you wanted to prioritize in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of that for me came from the challenges of who I am as a human, like, prone to high anxiety and worry, prone to very busy mind, or the idea of needing to be overproductive to be valuable, or, all of those things. But even in school, like in university, I would get an assignment, go home, finish it, and be done, so I could have that free time. And ultimately, it's funny when you say like the freedom to go home and prepare a meal. In 2022, I had one of my graduates, a culinary nutrition expert, in my home preparing meals for my family. And which, again, luxury, a privilege. It was awesome. She was amazing. But also, why was I working so much that I wasn't able to do that for my family? Something that that was my business, was teaching people how to prepare food. And so I'd rush from my office to get my child from school, and then get home and have someone else in my kitchen preparing all the meals for us. And that's when I started to be like, okay, this is a disconnect. And for anyone with children, infants, toddlers, there's a certain need. But an active young child, an elementary age child, really just wants you and your full attention to do activities with them. And I was too tired. And like, I had a staff across Canada, so there would be Slack messages coming in up till 7 p.m. sometimes. And, I didn't have the discipline to be like, you'll wait till the morning. I would respond to them. So for too long, my attention was constantly divided at home in what should have been my time. And with anyone with a business, like, you're always partially on. That's just the nature of the beast. But that was really what ultimately was one of the reasons why I was like, okay, I think it's time to start to wind this thing down. Like, it's not working anymore.
That's really beautiful. I think just an understanding that in yourself, and then being able to make the business decisions that you need to keep those values prioritized. And again, you sort of bucked that trend of like, okay, well, we're going to reinvest in the business. We're going to scale it. I mean, gosh, you could have gone and kept going. It could have been this massive thing, but you kept true and authentic to the values and the things that were present in your life. Like you could say, okay, well, I'll spend time with him later, or we'll do activities later. Like I've got business to do, but like it's so beautiful to know that you stuck to your authentic and integral values. And you could see that throughout the whole time. It sounds like you were very aware of that and you were able to honor that throughout and make business decisions while keeping that in mind, which is, I think, probably a pretty big challenge, knowing what you could have done or what you should have. Like, I feel like we're
Exactly.
in the entrepreneurial world, it's like, don't shit on yourself.
Yeah, it's exactly it. Is that it's having the discipline to, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I remember, once I had my son, he was born in 2017, I completely stopped doing evening and weekend events. Like I was not going to be driving out to a suburb of Toronto to do like a talk in a health food store. Like that was off the table. There just wasn't enough value in it. And then I just didn't have the energy. And there was that component too. It's like I wanted to be present. And one of the best gifts, it's been almost 2 years since I scaled down my business to basically be, I'm terrible at being retired, which I have come to learn. But, every day at 3, if I'm picking him up, it's at 3. If my husband's picking him up, it's 3:30. Like the day is done and we hang out as a family. And like, what a special, like we always sort of wonder, like, will he even know how rare that is to like finish school and have both parents home, like just chilling or, going on a little adventure or whatever it is. Like we will in the summer, we will both go, well, spring, fall, but we'll both bike to get him and we hang out in the park after school. And like, that's a gift that he obviously takes for granted because he's 7.5. But, that we all get to do that as a unit is profoundly meaningful for Josh and I, at least, even if our son has no clue.
Yeah, and yeah, they won't remember, but it's about how that feeling of safety and that feeling of time and like those types, and him watching you have those values, and then when he grows up and it's like, oh, okay, well, this is different. My family was we were always like done by 3 o'clock and playing in the park. Like whatever it turns out that he gets into, that is always there. And that's why those years between 0 to 7 are so crucial, because they do get imprinted. And it's like, oh, well, I don't know if you're working till 5 because my family, we go play right now. So
Yeah.
even that notion, like that will stick 100%.
Although he may wonder, is like, did they ever work? Like, I mean, he knows Josh sometimes has clients, and it was funny because we got back from our holiday and I was on my computer, which I had closed it for 3.5 weeks, which is like a personal record. And I was like dealing with like some accounting stuff and just business admin stuff. I was like, I don't like working. And it came out of my mouth, and my son goes to me, well, you're retired and daddy actually works. And I've never heard him say that. It's like, what is imprinting? But yes, we're teaching him business. He's got his own little businesses going.
And I think, I mean, you said it, you said it, entitled 24-year-old. And I think there's such heavy programming around getting a job in that successful thing. And it's like, I truly believe, and that's why I'm on the path that I'm on, that there is another way to do things. Like,
Yeah.
and when you said like, this isn't it, like, it's not that like, oh, we don't like working or contributing to our community or serving the people around us, or, there is those nitty gritty accounting things that you have to do. And I can't imagine that those are fun. But at the same time, like, I do believe we are human beings, not human doings. And we are here having this human experience. And I think I don't know if there was ever a rule book about how to do a human life, but I think we're like in the process of literally breaking free of that societal conditioning around like, okay, well, this is how you do a human life, and do it and you'll be happy. And I feel like they just shove it down our throats.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it just takes that little itch. And maybe it is that 24-year-old just being like, no, 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 I don't. And it's not, I wouldn't even say it's entitlement. It's just seeing the world in a different way while
Yeah.
still serving community.
Yeah. And it's a curious thing too, because like you mentioned that, people might, poop on a teacher's schedule, being like, you're done at 3:30 and you have summers off and all your holidays and all of that. But what's interesting is that, and you've maybe experienced this, is that even if it was a 40-hour work week or whatever it was, and that's what I had. And it was like clockwork for most cases. I was like, this is killing my day. But as soon as it was my own problems I was solving within my business, I'd work 60 hours. I'd work 80 hours. When I was running my cooking school, I was happily working 7 days a week from morning till night and couldn't have been happier. I was so inspired by what I was doing and the problems I was solving that it was no longer like, this is killing my day. It's like, this is my day and it's amazing. And I think that I've been thinking about this recently because while we were on winter break, my son kept talking about school and how excited he was to go back to school. And he loves math. And, you talked about the different children in his little community there. And we love that it's like a world that is really separate from us. Like it's his world. And he's in a Montessori. So he's in the equivalent of grade 2 in a Montessori. And so they have a lot of freedom to learn how they want to learn and do research on what they're interested in. And they learn how to present and do all these things and really learn accountability. So what he has to do in his class is keep a journal all day and stay accountable to how he used his time in the classroom. And both Josh and I hated school. Like we endured it. Josh dealt with it by barely getting by. I dealt with it by trying to figure out the system and win and get, my 100%, or it wasn't good enough. And, we all have our dysfunctions. But most children learn to tolerate being in school when they do not enjoy it and aren't engaged. And again, they're solving problems and doing work that isn't relevant to them because most of the curriculum isn't relevant. And then they go to jobs that aren't relevant, or, it's for a paycheck for the other, 16 hours in the day or the 2 days off a week or whatever it is. And like you were saying about, learning to do life differently than how sort of the human life has been programmed. I think it's deconditioning from the idea that we actually need to suffer for any gains we have in our life. And it's not to say that being an entrepreneur or living a life of freedom, however you define it, won't have its challenges and hardships and real life things that happen. But optimally, you can see the light at the end as you're solving these problems that are maybe more relevant to your actual 3-dimensional or 5-dimensional life that you're living.
Yeah, I love that. It is that deconditioning. And yeah, from school, like we're learning, I remember high school, like, and I know this is thrown out a lot, like, oh, we're learning the Pythagorean theorem. And like, when in the heckin' bob did I ever use that in my whole life? But then when it came to, I think it was data management, and they were teaching me how to use an Excel spreadsheet in high school. And I was like, oh, finally something relevant to me, and I can organize my data and I can like see how like to manipulate something that actually worked. And I was like, and that's when honestly grade 10 math, I was all of a sudden like, oh, something useful. And I think we do get programmed into this kind of normal life. I just opened up The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, and it's so amazing. And he talks about like the toxic world and just how we've basically normalized this toxicity. And toxicity can mean like a lot of different things, but in this way, it's like working for these redundant kind of unconnected, unrelated goals, whether it's on a math project on the Pythagorean theorem that you are literally never going to use again in your whole life, for most of the population, or it's working a job where you're, writing things or doing stuff and punching in and out. And you're like, well, I guess I do this for X, but X is not purpose. It's not joy. It's not fulfillment. It's for just a paycheck.
Right. Which can also be valid.
Yes.
Some people need a paycheck, but I mean, not some people, we all need money, for now, but until we're trading gold coins and eggs or whatever it comes to. But the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is what the job actually costs. So you get a paycheck, but it's at a cost. It's at a cost to things in your life. And some people will be like, well, I'm commuting an hour to my job and I need it because I have my car payments and insurance and gas and I have to, you buy clothes for this job. And then you're buying takeaway because you're at this job all the time. And sometimes the more you work, the more expensive your life actually becomes, where you could actually get a different kind of job, work half the time, be closer to home, and not need all those accessory things, and your entire cost of living shifts. So I've never truly been sold on like, well, I need my high paying job for all these things. It's like, well, at what cost? What are you trading to have that? Could you live on less and live happier on less and not be miserable when you wake up Monday morning or have the Sunday night blues because of the week ahead, or waiting till, when you're younger, you're like waiting till Thursday night is like the night out, which never made sense to me because you still have to go to work Friday. Or like, living for the weekends. I think it's on average, we work 260 days out of the year, our standard work days in Canada. That's a lot of days to be watching the clock to just pass by. And guaranteed everyone has it in them to either find a job, to work with a company or an entrepreneur or whatever it is that would fill them up, and or to create their own way in the world, which does take a leap and it takes a huge responsibility and it takes a commitment, which not everyone is ready to do or should do. Like not everyone should start their own business, that's for sure. But, I also don't think everyone should be miserable. So take your pick. Not all jobs have to be miserable. I tried to create a beautiful place for people to work. And I wanted to ensure that this workplace was never a source of stress. The work that had to get done might be challenging at times, but that having to ask me a question was never going to be scary, or there was never any interpersonal conflict amongst the team. Like none of that stuff there was zero tolerance for any of it. Having open lines of communication, like there can be beautiful, joyful workplaces. So find those if where you are is miserable.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that the idea is like, not everybody has to become an entrepreneur. That's not the only way to do it. And I think that there's also this really beautiful sort of understanding that, yeah, go find another entrepreneur who's already set up the systems and slot yourself into that culture and see if they obtain the same values as you. I mean, first you get clear on your own values. But if they obtain the same values as you and the work feels purposeful and the environment in which they have created and curated for their employees works for you, then that can also be a joyful experience as long as you're clear on your values and you can find someone who matches those.
Exactly. I always hired people who were entrepreneurial. Every single one of my employees had either had their own business at one point, had a side hustle, whatever it was. And I wanted to give them the freedom, because what I think engages us in a job is, one, to be engaged and be given not just accountability, but a sense of responsibility, freedom to solve problems on their own and like gather for solutions, gather to brainstorm, but like, this is your problem to solve. And I trust and know you can do it. And I'm here however I can support you in solving this problem. So, and that's ultimately what entrepreneurship is, that you're constantly looking at how to solve problems, how to make things more efficient, in some cases more profitable, how to better serve everyone who touches your business. And so, and what I learned, and what actually took me some time to fully grasp, is that people can be entrepreneurial and people can also want to be the second in command, not the one in command. That, we did when we were hiring people, and this didn't determine if they got hired or not, but we did this bird personality test. You could be like an owl, an eagle, a peacock, or there was one other. I had lots of owls who were like, wanted to do the work, but didn't want to be the peacock, like didn't want to be out front at all. And it worked beautifully because there was no jealousy. There was no like, oh, put in my time here so I can go do it myself, which I had in the past, had those people as well, because I value those qualities. But, really recognizing your strengths and what you can give. And not everyone, like, as I said, running a business is ridiculously challenging and confronting to who you are. That is not always the ticket to freedom. Because if you can't figure out how to delegate or cannot build trust and responsibility in those you hire, cannot get yourself organized and disciplined to stick to a schedule, fulfill on what you actually need to do day to day, it's sort of like an inverse pyramid that it's only going to be as strong as the foundation. If the foundation is weak and crumbling or confused and disoriented and, not sure what it is, nothing can build on top of it. And so that takes a whole lot of radical honesty at what your weaknesses are so that you have the support and can hire the support and delegate the support that's needed.
The word that stuck out for me in all of that was just trust. Like, you were able to give freedom because you probably first established that trust. You played on the strengths and areas for improvement for your staff, and that trust, and you trusted that no matter what would happen in your business, whether it was them that figured it out or you mentoring and helping and supporting, you had that element of trust in what was happening. And I think that's a really big element of freedom, that if you don't trust yourself and your ability to like mentor and bring others along with you through this journey of life, like that's a huge piece of that freedom to be like, okay, I trust you, go and do that. The same way that you would do that with children, and the same way that you would allow them to be like, okay, I'm here and I've got you, and I know that you've got this too.
Yes. And it's the biggest leap of faith, which, didn't happen in the first couple of hires I did, but was being able to hire people who were better at their job than I could be is a huge leap. So like you talk about spreadsheets, I'm allergic, like anaphylactic, deathly allergic. I will drop dead if you give me a spreadsheet full of numbers. I learned how to read them, but I can't. Even, my money mastery course that I released in 2024, I went back to my original operations director, Asha, and I'm like, help, like there's like 2 spreadsheets. I need you to please create these formulas because I can't. So recognizing, and, you and I, like I gave you a little tutorial in like the project management tool I like. And like, it was very top level because I'm not the one who actually organizes that, because it's very challenging for me to break a project into component parts. I see like the grand vision. I know what I can contribute to it. I can kind of give a rough timeline, but my timelines are usually like, yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. We're done. And they're like, no, we need 6 weeks. I'm like, really? Okay, fine. And again, trusting. And so the more trust I could give, and the more elevated my hires were, that they were exceptional at what I was hiring them to do, the whole system just worked so beautifully.
It's amazing. Yeah. So if someone is thinking about becoming unbound, if they have this inkling, this feeling in their body, they're like, okay, yep, this is resonating. I know that there's something more. What would be like the first little baby step? And like, I have it in my mind what I think I would do, but what would you say to like either a younger version of yourself where they are just like, okay, something's got to give. Where on earth do I start?
I'm going to give you 3 options. They're like on a spectrum of like not woo-woo to super woo-woo. So we'll start with the not woo-woo, which is to actually look at the work you're potentially doing right now. So maybe it's a job or a job you had in the past, and you're going to make a chart with 4 quadrants. Okay? This might be hard for me to explain, so stay with me.
Okay.
In the top right, I never know my right from left. Let's do top left quadrant. You're going to write all the things you love to do that you believe only you do exceptionally well. And then on the right side, you're going to write all the things you're really great at doing that you do not like to do. And on the bottom on the left, you're going to write all the things only you can do that you do not like. And on the bottom right, the things you do not like and you don't want to do. So what you're doing is you're kind of gathering. So what's in that top left corner of what you love to do and you think only you, like that you excel at it in an exceptional way? Optimally, whatever it is you end up doing, you want most of your time spent in that upper left quadrant. Maybe a time you're doing all the things. But this is to get super clear on where you get your joy from. So a lot of people will say like, you know what, I want to be an author. I want to write a book. It's like, okay, well, you write the book and then the next 10 years of your life are spent going up on stages, if you want to keep selling this book, creating programs around it, traveling, and like maybe you want to do that. But then you think about like, okay, traveling, like so that's packing, unpacking, being away from home, sleeping in random hotels, being in these fluorescent lit rooms, eating hotel food. It's like, do you really want that? So the reason why I always start with that top left quadrant, what you love, what you're great at, is because whatever you end up doing, if you're going to follow your heart, take that courageous pivot, you want most of it to be really enjoyable day to day, the day-to-day vision of your life, not the ego of what it'll look like if you succeed in this company, but what your actual work will be. So that's like my least woo-woo way to start. The middle of the road is to start looking around at things you think you'd love to do and talk to people. Find out what their steps were and their process was. Being like, you know what, I would love to be a podcast host and producer. Who could I possibly talk to who is on that journey to doing it? What are they loving about it? What are the unforeseen challenges? So like we live in a society, in a world, in a time where we want like instant gratification and instant dramatic results from aggressive action. And that's not actually how you build the foundation to a life. So take your time in thinking these parts through. So finding people who are doing what you love and call them. Like dare to use the telephone and have a conversation with someone about their journey, about their process. And you know, it's old school and it still works. The super woo-woo is to actually find moments in your day where you are in silence with yourself. And, you know, I teach a free coherence class. There's tons of methods. You could walk in the woods in silence, like leave your phone, leave your headphones, but to start to re-engage with who you are in your heart. And our heart's intelligence connects to the cosmos. And the heart doesn't have anxiety. It doesn't have depression. It doesn't have worries. It only reads the energy of the present, and it reads the energy of what surrounds us in the present moment. So the more that we can get silent and start to tune into the infinite wisdom of our heart, which has more impact on our brain than the other way around, we will start to just know things. Trust me. And you start to just know. And again, you have to check your ego and check your doubt and check your belief, because we can make ourselves believe anything we want about ourselves. That does not make it true unless we follow it up with the action. But you have to know truly, without fear and without ego and without fear of judgment and all those things, what is resonating in your heart that you want to bring forth. First, just think about your own life, because what's good for us independently, individually, is good for the world. Ultimately, when it's not your ego, when it's like, this is what would nourish me, this is what would bring me joy. It's part of being the joyful, and part of being in the joyful rebellion is to live in joy. So tapping in, well, again, meditation, yoga, fishing, golf, whatever it is that brings you to a place of flow state. I recommend crochet. That is how you start to tap in and be brave enough to answer it. And I will never forget the moment when I was like, I'm going to go into nutrition. And I was in this health food store and this woman was telling me all these things about this protein powder. And it was like the lights came on and the angels were in the balcony and they were like, no. That's my singing. And I was like, I want to know all of this. Like, I want to know this. And it was scary. And it was scary to tell my parents I wanted to go back to school. And it was funny. I told my coworker, we shared a windowless office at this ad agency. Her name's Paula. And I was like, I think I'm going to go to nutrition school. And Paula's like, that's so obvious. So there's that. is just tuning in to the messages, even if they make absolutely no sense. You don't have to light your life on fire to follow it, but you just start dipping your toe into what you're hearing when you ask the question.
I love that it's everything you just said is, depending on the journey or the path that you're on, is accessible. And I feel like the writing of the lists of the things and writing it all down to see it on paper, to tuning into the heart, like that is beautiful. I feel like I low key did all of those things, maybe in a different way, maybe in a pros and cons list or something like that, through meditations and through things that were just like gifted to me. And they're like, here you go. Like, do you want to do this? And I just listened to those little signs and those things that was like, oh, maybe this is the thing that's, the opportunity or whatever it may be. So I love that, those three sort of things that you could do. That's amazing. So I know you're retired, but you're failing at retirement. So if people want to go find you, where can they check out the work, these courses that you've mentioned, which I've been a part of, and they are truly amazing once you do them.
Yeah. So you will get there. You and our dear mutual friend Kendra. I told her you and Kendra. Kendra's amazing, everybody. I think, is she going to be on your show? I think she told me she was.
Yep.
So that's great. Maybe she already has been. Who knows? But anyway, you guys can start your study group together. Go to fun.megantelpner.com. Join my mailing list. Because I send out random emails about random things all the time. I'm always creating something. I'm working on a brand new project that maybe will see the light of day in 2025, but my current mantra is let it breathe. So there's no time urgency, no rush. But I do have all of my culinary courses remain available. I have my money mastery course. If you wanted, I talked about the tapping into your heart. I have a full course on heart coherence and waking up and how to brave the awakening process. That one is called Rise and Shine. So it's all there. If you want to send us an email, do that, and we will tell you what course you need to take for this point in your life. It's me and my assistant Jen, and she's wonderful. She's a gem of a human, and she can help you out if you're looking for anything that I can offer and be of service of for you.
Amazing. All right. Well, I love that you're failing in retirement, because that means selfishly I still get to enjoy your courses and your emails, and I love every second of it. So thank you for failing. And thank you so much for being here today. I feel like this conversation was exactly what could lead to anyone, no matter where they are on this path of knowing that there is another way to do things. I think this is amazing. So thank you so much for your time today, Megan.
Absolute pleasure. If I have one last thing, it would just be to dare to do it differently, because we live in a broken system, and to try and live within it will break us. And so the more of us that break out and elevate that frequency, the more powerful we collectively become in rising above the chaos.
Amazing. Great. Wonderful last thoughts. Thank you so much. And my friends, continue this journey, become unbound, think of things differently, and we will see you on the next episode.